so glad to see you all here tonight. This is quite an interesting endeavor that we've taken on for ourselves. We've never co-led a presentation before. And so that was exciting and sometimes challenging as we merged our different personalities and styles to put this together. But we mostly were excited with our different analytics to find out what's going on with St. Joseph. What do we know about him? We started out thinking there wasn't a whole lot to know about this quiet, gentle, humble man who was always there for Mary and Jesus. But there's a whole lot to learn about this man. And we're just going to give you an eyedropper full in the next hour because it just unpack all this stuff just a little bit so that you get a flavor of the many, many aspects of who he is. Just like Mary, Joseph was carefully chosen by God to be his representation as father on earth. That in itself is an awesome thing to swallow. Very, very, very important. And we're going to learn a lot more about how important that is shortly. Larry?
Okay. To start our presentation, I'm going to put everybody into the side-by-side view. It's going to be a shared screen, and you're going to see, I hope, on all of your screens, suddenly our slideshow on the left and either your picture or the whole gallery on your right. Now, it'll probably work best if you take the picture of your gallery and where it says show the grid, choose side-by-side speaker view. If you do that, you will be seeing the person who is speaking and that person only, and it wouldn't be confusing. You could just keep the gallery view if you'd like. Otherwise, here's where the slides are going to be, and I'm going to make them, you can grab the right-hand side and make the slide part a little bit bigger on your screen if you'd like. So without that, with that, let's, I'm ready to begin. I don't think there's anything more I need to say. If there's any questions about how this thing is going to work, just chime in and I'll try to answer. There is going to be a time when we're going to allow for discussions at the end. Although, if you care to interrupt, by all means, interrupt. So I'm going to begin by talking about the one thing about St. Joseph's life that we do know, and that is what's in the Gospels, which is not much, but it does have certain important things. This is what we specifically can find in the Gospels about Joseph's life. Of course, we will find no direct quotations from St. Joseph, as Father Duffy joked around with me. First of all, we know that Joseph was visited by an angel in a dream after he became betrothed to Mary and was told, don't worry about the fact that Mary is pregnant and you didn't do it. She has been impregnated by the Holy Spirit and you should go ahead and marry her. That's one of at least four visitations by angels, and Mary Ann is going to tell you about some of the others. That's one thing we've definitely in the Bible. Next thing, they did get married. This is one of the various forms of artwork that was prepared by the marriage of Mary and Joseph. This shows a very formal marriage in the temple, which is probably where they got married, because the history of Mary, at least through legend, is that Mary was raised in the temple from age 2 to about age 12. And she was selected, Joseph was selected as her bride by priests in the temple. One thing, notice when you see Joseph on the right, that's flower that he's carrying, which is actually a staff that's got lilies flowering at the end. We're going to say more about that later. But the fact that Joseph married Mary is in the Bible. Then, as Mary was pregnant, it is specifically in the Bible that Mary was a virgin before, during, and after the birth of Christ. So Joseph and Mary specifically had no relations during the entire pregnancy, and that's in the Bible. So the birth of Christ we know about. We think it's in a stable, but there's a possibility of something else to complicate it. But definitely the child was born and shortly after found itself in a stable. The trip to Egypt, the flight to Egypt, was another occasion where Mary and Joseph were warned that they better get out of Dodge because King Herod was hot to trot to murder the little children. The only thing I can say about the flight to Egypt is that it had to happen after the Magi visited and after the shepherds visited, so that Jesus was probably not a couple of months old infant at the time of the flight to Egypt. It was probably more like at least a year or so old, if that makes any difference to you. They had to have time for the other things to have happened. This is one of the traits of Joseph that comes to bear. Joseph heard the warning that they had to leave Bethlehem and go to Egypt, and he obeyed. And this was a difficult crossing for a father with a young child to be doing this, but he was up to the task to lead his small family on to do this. The other part that we get Joseph is that after they returned from Egypt, when Jesus was around 12 years old and they were living in Nazareth, they visited the temple, and the young Jesus just astonished the people in the temple by his knowledge. But Joseph and Mary lost him, and they had left to return home, finding to their dismay that their 12-year-old son was missing. Now, you think about this for a second. This kind of implies that there was a period of Mary and Joseph getting to come to grips with the fact that this child of theirs was really God, that they probably didn't fully comprehend at that point just what they had on their hands. Because otherwise, think about it, if they had missed Jesus in the temple and they knew he was God, would they be worried? Is God going to make you worry? No. So there must have been some anxiety on their part, indicating that they were still coming to grips with just what kind of a child they had. And this is just part of the growing experience that they had, as it highlights the need for them to learn how to be parents. And although it's not said, at that point, Joseph would have asked Jesus, "Why did you leave us?" Or "Why did you let us leave you?" And Jesus, the famous answer was, "Don't you know I need to be about my Father's business?" Other than that, we presume that as Jesus was growing up, Joseph taught him his carpentry skills. And that's a reasonable assumption, but there's nothing in the gospel that actually says so. Also, we know that since there's no mention of Joseph at all during Jesus's public ministry, that Joseph must have died before Jesus began his public ministry. So sometime after they lost him in the temple, but before Jesus began his public ministry, Joseph would have died. And the presumption is that he died in the company of Mary and Jesus. That's about as much as we can infer from the Bible. Now, Mary Ann, it's your turn.
We're going to switch gears for just a few minutes and to get at the big picture and look at some of the feasts and patronages of St. Joseph. He was slow to be recognized in the first millennia. Sometimes people say they didn't quite know what to do with them. They focused on Jesus and Mary. It wasn't talked about all that much. And yes, Jesus was the son of Joseph and probably did learn some carpentry skills, but he was a boy growing up in Nazareth, and then onward to manhood. And beyond that, when they thought about him, they didn't know what to say. So let's skip to the last 150 years, where after a lot of saints in the second millennium had visions, had relationships and deep devotions to Saint Joseph, that just God put this on people's hearts to get to know him, to start to get to know him. Once that happens, then the church picks up on it and adds to it. So that's 150 years ago, Pius IX made Joseph the patron of the Universal Church. Have these background clock noises that we can't seem to change. And if you move on and you read through some of these, after that, the Feast of the Holy Family, just 20 so years later, by Leo the 13th, putting him on the map, so to speak. And then there was the addition 30 years later of Blessed be Saint Joseph in the Divine Praises. So he's getting more and more recognition and more support, and certainly more following. So then there was the Feast of Saint Joseph the Worker, which was established in 1955 by Pius XII to counter the communist May 1st celebrations. And he was also loved dearly by John the 23rd, who made him the patron of the Second Vatican Council. That was a very special one. Pope John the 23rd was known as the Pope of Saint Joseph. He was the Pope of Saint Joseph. He had such a strong and verbal relationship with him. And so then early on, after John the 23rd, he added to the Eucharistic prayer, the first Eucharistic prayer, he added Joseph's name. And then along comes Pope Francis, and he adds the other three and declares Saint Joseph as with the year of Saint Joseph this year. Now, I don't know about the rest of the special years and how they get picked, but I heard a story recently that was from a priest who claims to have had a personal contact with some people in his community who have had it on their heart strongly to have a year of Saint Joseph. Very strongly. That's what they were looking to make happen. They wrote letters to Pope Francis. They wrote 3 letters to Pope Francis, and they didn't seem to go anywhere. So then somebody along the way here had a bishop contact who was going to have an audience with the Pope. And so this particular man asked him if he would hand carry a letter to Pope Francis, which he did. And Pope Francis then responded, and things began. Was this the only person who had it on his heart to celebrate Saint Joseph? I doubt it. I imagine there were a number of other people. So the Pope was putting this all together, and it became clear that this was the right thing to do, and this was the right year to do it, and the set of circumstances in our pandemic that we need all the special graces and blessings and learn how to celebrate men and fathers in a new kind of way, restore their great value to the many places where people lost jobs and we'll never get them back. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. But on the year of St. Joseph, we are going to switch again to some interesting stories.
Okay, that's me. There's many legends surrounding St. Joseph, and there's no way to confirm the truth or falsity of some of them. although at least a few others, you might say this does not seem reasonable. And by the way, I've got to stop at this point and stand up so you can see my sweatshirt. Mount St. Joseph University. I've got a granddaughter who graduated from there. It's in Cincinnati. Okay. The first legend to talk about is, did Joseph have other children besides Jesus? There's actually two forms of this story. One is from one of the old apocryphal books of the story, History of Joseph the Carpenter from around the 4th century AD, which said that prior to marrying Mary, Joseph was a widower, that he had a first wife, and he had children by the first wife, had 4 boys and 2 girls. And that's a story that we can't disprove. Another aspect of it is that if you want to get really technical about the Bible description about the virginity of Joseph and Mary, it said that Mary became a virgin. The translation is Mary's virginity was from before the conception of Jesus, and that they had something that says that, and Joseph and Mary had no other marital relations before the birth of Jesus, implying that maybe there could have been marital relations between Joseph and Mary after the birth of Jesus. Now, most Catholics think that that's pretty preposterous. And it was in the 6th century that the Venerable Bede, St. Bede, made a very firm declaration of that no, whatever you say before the marriage, Joseph was surely retained his own chastity after the birth of Jesus, and that there were no other children after that. Although there are some Protestant denominations who do take it as a fact that Joseph and Mary had other children after the birth of Jesus. We don't, but you won't go to hell if you want to believe it the other way. But it's not what we commonly teach. So that's a picture that would indicate Jesus and brothers and sisters. And this is another one that would indicate Joseph the carpenter showing his other children, in addition to Jesus, how to do carpentry. Now, this one, this picture that shows the marriage of Joseph and Mary, notice that staff that Joseph is carrying. It's a staff that's got lilies flowering at the top. That's the way Joseph is commonly pictured. And that legend goes back to the idea of how Joseph was selected as the husband for Mary, that there were several other potential suitors for Mary when it was time for her to get betrothed, and that all the other potential suitors turned in their staffs to the priests at the temple, and Joseph's staff flowered. And that was the sign that Joseph was to be the husband of Mary. Now, that story about that is from one of the apocryphal stories, so we can't prove that that's true. However, almost every statue of Joseph that you'll see will show him carrying a staff that's got a flower at the top, which clearly comes from that idea of that was an indication of how Mary was chosen to be his bride at the temple. So here's another picture of Joseph holding the child Jesus, again with that flowering staff. Now, there's also a legend from some of the apocryphal writings that Jesus was not actually born in a stable, but that he was actually born in a cave, and that after his birth, they later moved to a stable. You can believe that or not believe that. It doesn't really make a whole lot of difference as far as the fact that Jesus was still born, and where he was born was in Nazareth. But there are several legends that said that first they went to a cave where a midwife came and assisted Mary in the birth, and it was after that they moved to the stable. What else have we got here? So that's another picture of the Jesus in a cave being born. That's where that idea came from. Now, Joseph as an old man, Joseph is almost universally understood to have been older than Mary. How much older than Mary is up for grabs. There's at least one story that says that Joseph was 111 years old when he died, which I think is an exaggeration by any means. But the Bible is frequently full of exaggerations. Don't worry about that. I don't think Methuselah actually lived to be 900 years old either. But numbers get a little. Don't look for the Bible as your math book, you know. However, when Joseph died, one of the legends from the 4th century is that Jesus told his foster father that his body, Joseph's body, would not be corrupted after death, that Joseph's uncorrupted body would survive up through resurrection day. Didn't say that he was going to be assumed into heaven, but that his body would be preserved from corruption. Now that's a story that goes back to at least the 4th century, but it's also popped up several times more recently. The one most notable recently is with the mystic Anne Catherine Emmerich, which we're going to talk about later, who also had a vision about Joseph's body being uncorrupted. But so all of those are maybe and maybe not legends about Joseph. Those aren't the only legends about Joseph, but those are the ones that are most noteworthy. And you can take them or leave them. There's no biblical background to them at all. And that's all I got to say about that, except we can move on to the next segment, which is yours, Mary Ann.
Sure. We had some very long discussions about that last part of our presentation that Larry put together, and which pictures to show and which one showed how old Joseph was. And when you think about a 91-year-old man marrying a young girl and that he was to be her protector, somehow that just doesn't hold muster to me. But I imagine other people think the same way. In any case, we're looking at the attributes of Saint Joseph right now. And I find myself going back to the 4 times that we are told that the angels appeared to Joseph. And then I start thinking about, this is somewhat of an aside, that in my own growth in spirituality, I can't imagine as I grow closer to the Lord and open up to the Spirit, and in my prayer life, that if it's the first time ever that God said, by the way, go ahead and marry this girl. She's really not pregnant by somebody else, and you'll be okay, that I would believe that. I think it takes a life of devotion and a life of prayer and a life of just growing in that relationship with God, that, and maybe a bunch of other visits and dreams that we're not told about. But it's my hunch that Joseph had a very strong devotion to the Lord. And even with that, and even knowing that he can trust God, he had all these doubts about marrying Mary. He wanted to do the right thing. He was a good man. He didn't want to embarrass her. He certainly didn't want to see her killed for her situation. So he really struggled with what to do, but he's a very humble and honest man, and so he wasn't going to make things difficult. So the 4 times by the angel, one is go ahead and marry her. And then the second one, are you switching? Is that your only picture?
Oh, that's the only one about the message of the angels.
Oh, okay.
The next one is about the humble carpenter.
Oh, yeah, no, it's okay. So then the angel tells them they're going to Bethlehem. They've got to go for the census. We're looking at the different attributes of Joseph. I have them all on one page in my own thinking too. But the attributes of Joseph, one of them is a very humble and quiet man who did not speak very much. But he, beyond being a carpenter, he's now the spouse of Mary, and she's with child, and he's a problem solver. And he has to work very hard to figure out where to take her, how to protect her, how to make everybody safe. And he does this in a very efficient kind of way. So these are some of the special gifts of him. And I want to say that he was very courageous, that all that he had to take on was beyond the norm by any stretch of the imagination. So he was courageous. And so then he's told to leave Bethlehem and go to Egypt. He had to just pick his family up, and God said through a dream and an angel, just take them to Egypt. It's dangerous. You can't be here. Herod is out to get them, and you better get out of here. And Joseph had to figure out how to set the trip. He's got a 1-year-old probably. He's got a wife. He's got not a lot of belongings, and they have to make quite a trip to Egypt. And he figured that all out and made it happen. I'm gathering seamlessly. And then they're in Egypt, and he gets the message, Herod has died, so he can come back now. It's safe to come back. So he gets ready to go back to Judea. And he's on the trip back, and he has another dream. And the dream is, not so fast. I don't think we want to go back to Judea. You want to go to Galilee, because Herod's replacement, who is his son, is just as evil as Herod was. And he's out to get all children under the age of 2. We don't know how many that was, but be somewhere, Larry and I guess somewhere between 10 and 20 at that time. Although, as we've heard the story over the years, we think about hundreds, but that's probably not the case at this point in time. But as we focus on Joseph, the things that he had to do that he hadn't had to do before, that he was told by an angel to do, think about what you would do. Would you just jump up and go, yes, sir, I'm ready to go at a moment's notice, like a good soldier? It's a little hard for us, but this man had grown in trust with his relationship with the Lord over so many years that he was now ready to receive these commands, so to speak, and follow up on them. I find that absolutely awesome. He was also one who welcomed the will of God, and that comes over time, how we lend our will to God's will and over time. And then there's another piece that comes in here. That's the teacher of the value, dignity, and joy of work. I think in and of itself, it's an important line, but the line comes from Patris Corde, which is the apostolic letter that Pope Francis wrote initiating the apostolic year. And he did it because of the pandemic. He did it because this is a time of great turmoil for men and losing their dignity and losing their livelihood and losing their way of making money and their value in the world. And he wanted to help restore folks to their greater value in life, in family, and in the world. And how do you do that in the middle of a massive year of international turmoil? So you turn to St. Joseph, the faithful servant, who was so many things in his very quiet way, and you unpack all of that as much as you can. And so I think that's all that I wanted to say about that. He stood up to conventions and in so many ways. He broke them because he's with Mary and they have a child, and this is very different. And he was asked by God to raise his son. I'm going to give my child to you to raise and bring into the human part of him, the manhood. I just find that very powerful and meditatable. Okay.
Okay, I guess it's back to me then. We're going to switch gears again and talk not about St. Joseph specifically, but about various saints and mystics who over the years have had experiences that involve St. Joseph. And I'm going to talk about the first two, and then Marianne is going to talk about some of the others. Although we've only selected a few out of very many saints and mystics who have had either visions of St. Joseph or miracles that involve St. Joseph, or anything that involves St. Joseph. And it's pretty hard to pick, but well, this is our picking. First of all, I want to talk about Blessed Catherine Ann Emmerich, lived from 1774 to 1824. This mystic, my gosh, she was a super mystic. She had the stigmata. The stigmata meaning that on her her arms and feet and heart, the wounds of Jesus. She also had as a second stigmata, a stigmata of the crown of thorns. She had the crown of thorns impregnated in her skull. And to make it even more, she had what's called transverberation. Transverberation is beyond stigmata. It's where you feel your heart penetrated in the way that the staff of the soldier, while Jesus was on the cross, plunged his spear into the chest of Jesus and penetrated the heart. She had all of these things, as a result of which every drawing or every illustration you see of Catherine Emmerich, she's always got bandages on. These are two illustrations. Here's another one. Here's a third. She as a young person, she had all of these stigmata, although the stigmata is not specifically what we're remembering her for. What we're remembering her for is that she had a vision virtually every day as an adult. And her visions went through a wide range of subjects. For example, if it was Easter Sunday, she had a vision of the resurrection. If it was Good Friday, she had a vision of Christ dying on the cross. Every day of the liturgical year, she had a vision that somehow related to that part of the liturgical year. And yes, if it was St. Joseph's feast day, she had a vision about St. Joseph. All of her visions, well, I guess all of her visions, were recorded by a person named Clemens Brentano, who wrote several volumes about the visions of Catherine Emmerich. And his writings are spectacular. The only unfortunate thing about the writings of Clemens Brentano is that he had a bit of a poetic sentiment about him, and he kind of embellished her visions so that he made them a little bit better than what they actually were. Although if he had stuck to the reality, he had plenty of material to work with as far as visions go. One of the things that Ann Emmerich is given, Catherine Emmerich is given credit for, is a vision where she helped to identify the house that Mary lived in after Jesus had died. It's in Ephesus, and that home is now a shrine, and you can visit. And actually, a couple of years ago, when Judy and I took a tour of the Greek Isles, we actually visited the home of Mary. It's right across the bay from where St. John wrote the Apocalypse, the book of Revelations. But she helped identify that. And also, it was one of her visions that the body of Joseph is preserved somewhere in his tomb, wherever his tomb is, and is still preserved today. It has set off a search various times in the last several years to see if anybody can find the body of St. Joseph. Has not been found. Most people seem to think that it's in a village called Shechem, which I think is somewhere around Nazareth, but it has not been found. There is a shrine there that claims to hold the tomb of Joseph, but nobody's shown his body. So it's kind of a work in progress. But if you read anything about Anne Catherine Emmerich, she's got quite a story to tell, and particularly with the devotion to Joseph. And most of the mystics in the church, as it happens, were also got the stigmata. The most famous mystic that y'all might remember is Padre Pio, a more modern day mystic, and who also had the stigmata and who had quite a few other visions. But she really had the stigmata in a big way. Catherine of Siena also had them, but I think Mary Ann's going to talk about that. Or Teresa of Avila, I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the other saint that I want to talk about is Saint Andre Bessette. Gosh, Bob Weiner, I hope you're listening in on this. And gosh, Sister Corinne, I hope you're going to join in. And if you're not here now, that you see this. But Saint Andre Bessette was a Holy Cross brother. He lived in the century of the he died in 1937, but he was a Holy Cross brother, not a priest. He wasn't intelligent enough, academic enough to pass all the tests that are required to become a priest. So he became a brother. And in Montreal was where he was stationed. He was the doorkeeper of the monastery in Montreal. That was his job, doorkeeper. And can I say, was he a very good doorkeeper? He wasn't a priest, so he couldn't hear confessions. But anybody who spoke with him would find that he had such a wonderful insight on godliness, and St. Joseph in particular. His absolute first identity was St. Joseph. This is a quote from St. Andre Bessette. When you invoke St. Joseph, you don't have to say much. Say, if you were in my place, St. Joseph, what would you do? Well, pray for this on my behalf. He just said, let's follow St. Joseph. While being the doorkeeper, he established a little prayer place on the other side of the street from where the monastery was. He got visited by hundreds of people who wanted to just talk to him and tell him their story and listen to him tell back their stories. And this is a famous quote from Andre Bessette. God chose the most ignorant one. If there was anyone more ignorant than I am, God would have chosen him instead of me. This man was humble, and that's what Joseph is all about. Now, why did I say Bob Weiner? And why did I say Sister Corinne? And why do I include myself? Because if you've ever been to the University of Notre Dame, you can't get through that place without hearing about Father Hesburgh, the super champion leader that we had, Father Soren and Father Baden, the founders of the place, these great priests in the church. But they're not saints. Who became the saint? The only saint in the Holy Cross order was not Father Hesburgh, not Father Soren, not Father Baden, but the doorkeeper. And I just think that is such a great story to know that that tells you something about the humbleness of Joseph and the fact that how much God loves humble people. And so he's really a model to me. The only other Joseph that would be the similar model would be St. Joseph of Cupertino, the one who's the flying saint. He also was considered not smart enough to become a priest, except he got a little extra help to pass the examination. And otherwise, he never would have become a priest. So that's what I've got to say about those two saints. And I think that was the last. Oh, yeah. This is the very large oratory of Joseph, which was built in Montreal, just across from the monastery where Andre Bessette was, and it was through him that that this thing got built. Okay, let's move on. Mary Ann, it's your turn.
Yeah. following up on that for just a second, that's St. Joseph Oratory that we were just looking at. And so that's another patronage of St. Joseph. I didn't name them all earlier, but here's a partial list of what he's a patron saint of: the unborn, children, travelers, realtors, people who fear death, patron saint of carpenters, of course, the dying, engineers, families, fathers, spiritual fathers and physical family fathers, priests, workers, house hunters, people endowed, and a happy death. You've heard of some of those. I think there are at least a dozen more. So I just wanted to add those here at this point in time because we saw one of them. I'm going back a number of centuries at this point in time to some interesting apparitions. The first two are apparitions. The fourth one is as well. So this is Cotignac, and Cotignac is on the Côte d'Azur in France, and it's a mountain town. And the story goes that there was a 22-year-old thirsty shepherd named Gaspard who was working his flock, and he got really, really tired around 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And he went and just lay down in one of the rocky areas and took a nap. And he was awoken by a man standing next to him. He only really describes him as a very tall man. And this man said, "Move the rock." And Gaspard was like, but you don't understand. That's a very big rock. I'm not going to be able to move it. If you want a drink, move the rock. So Gaspard worked and worked, and he moved the rock. And there was a spring of water right underneath that rock. And he drank all that he needed to drink. And when he looked up, the man was gone. He went into town and he told all these people about what had just happened. And he actually had been told that it was St. Joseph. The man told him, "I am St. Joseph." So the people from town came to recognize that. And the spring is still there. There's a big shrine there right now. And at then there are testimonies galore about the sources of healing from the waters that spring from the spring. And this is one testimony. The waters of St. Joseph bring miracles. Since I returned, a man whom we know from Avignon, born lame, went to the spring and came back cured, having left his crutches there. Everyone drinks and carries away the water. So this is a holy water that has different properties for different people. And this is Cotignac, and this is still there, and it's real. And what I love about it, and the other stories I'm going to tell, is that you can prove it. There are people who know about it. There are people who were there. There are people who can testify to all of this. So that's Gaspard on the Côte d'Azur. And I looked up the town. It's a very precious, very pretty town. Someday, maybe I'll get to visit that town. The second story, and so what it says is, puisez avec joie aux sources du Sauveur, draw joyfully from the springs of water of the Savior. And then the next story, again, this is about somebody not suspecting Joseph to be around at all. It's about two shipwrecked Franciscans. And Franciscans are important because in the 8th and 9th centuries, they began spreading the word about St. Joseph. He didn't just appear. So he certainly had a lot of friends in the Franciscan order. So the Franciscans were on a ship, 300 people, and the ship sunk. It was a massive storm that killed everyone. And they were clinging to a rock somewhere or a piece of wood in the ocean and praying to St. Joseph, praying for 3 days to St. Joseph. And at the end of the third day, this man appears, I presume in a boat, and he takes them and leads them to safe harbor. And when they get to the safe harbor, They are so grateful for their lives being saved that they say, to whom do we give thanks for this? And he said, I'm St. Joseph. And then they said, how can we thank you? What is it that you would like from us? And he said, you may pray the 7 sorrows and 7 joys, the 7 Our Fathers and 7 Hail Marys daily, and you will be honoring me. Apparition of St. Joseph to 2 Franciscan friars. Can we prove that beyond anything in the 16th century, 1500s when that was happening? No. Does it make sense because of the Franciscans' great devotion to Joseph? Very possibly. The third one is Dear Saint Teresa of Avila. What a special woman she was. In addition to Anne Catherine of Emmerich and hundreds other, and my favorite, Catherine of Siena. Saint Teresa of Avila and Catherine of Siena were both mystics, and they were both declared doctors of the church in 1970. Saint Teresa was a founder of the Reformed Carmelite nuns, and the first convent was named, of course, St. Joseph, and the Saint Church was named St. Joseph. She was an author as well. I know of at least 3 books that she's written, her autobiography and The Interior Castle, and oh gosh, I can't think of the third one right now. When she was very young, when she was 21, she was in a convent and she got very sick. She got extremely sick. Now, this woman had an enormous devotion, like the others were finding who lifted up St. Joseph. And so she would pray to St. Joseph for healing. She just prayed and prayed and prayed to St. Joseph for healing. She almost died. She went into a coma. She came out of a coma. She lost the use of her legs for quite a while. She was what you call a really, really sick gal. And they really didn't think that she was going to make it. As a matter of fact, they actually thought she had died at one point. But she got well, and she attributed her getting well to St. Joseph. Part of her being ill, it was malaria that she had, and she had all kinds of headaches galore. So she's the patron saint of people with headaches as well, and certainly migraines. And she's the patron saint of writers. And she never gave up. She was one of those hardworking people who just listened to her spirit, went on and did everything that God told her to do. Do we have the prayer here? There's a couple of prayers that I wanted to highlight. That's the convent of St. Joseph in Avila.
Move on to the prayer.
Yeah, and this is the prayer. You've probably heard it many times, but it's her prayer that she was given. Christ has no body now but yours, no hands, no feet on earth but yours. Yours are the eyes through which Christ looks compassion into the world. Yours are the feet with which Christ walks to do good. Yours are the hands with which Christ blessed the world. Very, very powerful prayer that calls us all into ministry, calls us all to be open to whatever God asks us, whether it's in a dream, whether it's an angel, whether it's directly from him, that we know we're being called to do good in the world even more. So the other thing is the stigmata. She had the transverberation as well. She had the stigmata of the piercing heart. And lots of visions. That's all I wanted to say about her great devotion to St. Joseph and her and the patronage that she had and the reforms that she brought about. She really put the convent in its proper place. And the last thing I want to talk about here will be in Santa Fe, New Mexico. I wonder how many of you, I can't see and it won't happen, but I wonder how many of you will have been to Santa Fe to the Loretto Chapel, which has the circular staircase in it. I can't see, but I'm hoping that maybe some have. So there's a legend here. This is a very, very interesting legend that says, if you look at this staircase, the story goes that in the 1870s, the Sisters of Loretto prayed and prayed and prayed to find someone to, or even earlier, I guess, build their chapel. So they found a Frenchman came over to build the chapel, and he got as far as the church and the choir without a staircase. And then he died. And so then the nuns were in constant prayer and a novena, a special novena to St. Joseph, because he's the patron saint of carpenters. And so would he send someone to build the rest of the staircase? Other people had come in and wanted the commission, and they would say, this is impossible. This is an impossibility to build this staircase because there's no space. It's not enough room. It's a small chapel, so it won't work. And as you can see, it's specially made. So this man came to knocking on their door, and he said, I'm here looking for work, and I understand you need a carpenter. And he came with his own tools, and he said, I have one request, that I work privately at night. When you are not around, I will work. And they agreed to that request, and he built apparently by himself, he built this staircase. So we have the mystery of who it was that built the staircase, the mystery of what tools he used, because no nails were used, no glue was used, no support beam in the middle was used. And then there's the mystery of this gravity-defying structure that physicists still struggle with today.
Mary Ann, if I could interrupt for just a second to talk about that, I can't resist.
I knew you would.
Yeah, you know,
Take
take a look at that staircase. It reminds me of a slinky. It's like a piece of a spring. And from an engineering point of view, this thing is impossible. Any other circular staircase that you would see would have some kind of a support running up the middle of it, certainly being attached at the sides, because with just being attached at the bottom and at the top, it's like the thing could bounce up and down like a spring, but it doesn't. I don't know how the heck you can build a thing like that unless you're very, very, very good.
And even at that, this was a challenge, and it's a challenge to many today. So that's the miracle, that this was built. We don't exactly know who. We know that 100 years after it was built, that Sister Mary Straw Clark spent 7 years researching this whole system, and found a couple of notations that wood was purchased at some point, and learned that there was someone seemingly who was from out of town who was had been around the convent. They didn't know if he had built a staircase or not, but he was found with a bullet hole in his chest and died. And when the nuns tried to have a banquet to celebrate and thank him, he of course was dead, and nobody knew it at that point in time. But eventually he was buried in their cemetery. So there's some of the facts of the legend don't hold up, as is true of all legends. Some things true and some things are not true. But what is not even in the least question is the miracle that Larry's talking about. It's the existing structure, how it stays over the year, and how it was made. And I've been there, and it's absolutely beautiful. There's stories about the nuns being afraid to climb up because of their habits and their shoes. They didn't know if they'd fall off it or fall down. But here's an interesting picture that looks like it might have been in the early 1900s. There's at least 20 women on this double circular 360-degree turns without nails or glue. And so many people over the years, after it stopped being an active church, have been there for weddings, had their weddings there, and brides have gone, oh my God, how am I going to come down from that spiral staircase? I'm going to fall and break my neck. So it's scary to people, but no one's really ever been hurt. and the nuns have kept it intact. And it's more of a museum right now and a wedding chapel, so to speak. I found it a fascinating story, and it was beautiful to be there. If you're ever in Santa Fe, this is something you might want to, as well as Georgia O'Keeffe, Georgia O'Keeffe and, and her artwork, and this Santa Fe Loretto Chapel. When we give you our notes, when we put things on Louisa Prays, we will have a lot of connections and links to where we have done our research and who we have quoted. So you will know that we didn't pick this out of thin air, and God may have inspired us to do this, but the rest of it, it's all very scientifically notated. Okay, Larry.
Okay. We're ready to do a little discussion now, but first, just to follow up on what Marianne just said, on louisaprays.org, we're going to have all of this stuff up. I've already posted 5 things, which are kind of background material that we used, which you can get if you want. All the slides that we used in this presentation are going to be posted. There's 2 articles that we found from the Knights of Columbus magazine. One was about getting to know Joseph, and the other one was about the chivalry of Joseph. You can download both of those articles.
They're wonderfully written.
Very, very well done. Very well done. Very, very intriguing. Also, the apostolic pronouncement of Patris Corde, the entire text of that, you can download it, about St. Joseph. There's a prayer card for St. Joseph that you can download. And then there's a memorare to St. Joseph that is also downloadable.
St. Teresa of Avila had the memorare.
St. Teresa of Avila's one. Those are already up on the website that you can get right now. This presentation and the slides should be up by midnight tonight. No, no way. Be up by tomorrow morning sometime. I'll get the rest of it posted so that you can go back and see, including the presentation that we just had. So if you have a friend who missed the presentation, it'll be up there, at least an edited version, if we take out our mistakes. Other than that, we'd like to open up the floor now. Anybody is welcome to unmute yourself, ask a question. Let's have a discussion. Anybody want to say anything at all?
Question, challenge, affirmation, your own experience?
I'm going to go back to the full
gallery
screen,
view.
and you can get the full view if you'd like, so you can see who's asking a question. You can switch your view now to gallery view if you'd like, and you'll see everybody who's here. And if you want to speak up, just unmute yourself and come at us.
Hi, Larry. Thank you. Thank you, Marianne. That was a beautiful presentation. I too had a high school, St. Joseph's Mountain School. So he was very, very instrumental in my high school years. But I learned a lot more tonight. A lot of that stuff I did know, but a lot more I learned. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Welcome.
Regarding Brother Andre Bissett, at St. Joseph's Oratory in Montreal, on the 4th floor, there is a special chapel. And within that chapel is the blessed, preserved heart of Brother Andre Bissett, and which we, I guess about 5 years ago, which we visited and said all the prayers and visited that oratory. So if you're ever in Montreal, be sure to come to the 4th floor and visit Brother Andre.
We'll have to make that a stop. Thanks.
When we had just an aside, and when we were trying to decide who we were going to talk about and who we would eliminate, because obviously we stuck to our hour, Larry. That's pretty good, I think. But Larry was like, I have got to talk about Brother Andre. No matter what else, I have to talk about him. Anyway. Other questions, other comments? Anyone been there?
There is,
Raise your hand if you've ever been there to the oratory in Montreal. Raise your hand if you've ever been to the chapel, Loretto Chapel in Santa Fe.
Wow, how about that? Oh, the Marshalls have
Okay.
been around.
Yeah. Okay.
there's one other thing about St. Joseph. In St. Louis, near the waterfront, near the old cathedral, there is this shrine of St. Joseph. And in the mid 1800s, there was a very intense cholera outbreak. They were having like 20 funerals a day from that church alone. Like 200-300 people a day were being buried in St. Louis. So the priest of that parish got the parishioners together and said, let's pray to St. Joseph. This is his church. And so they did. And they promised St. Joseph through his intercession, if he would intercede for them to God to protect them from this cholera plague, that they would do something in his honor. And from that, everybody who signed it and everyone in their family from that day forward, nobody got cholera, nobody died. They have, through their contributions of, I think they gathered together $4,000, which back in 1850 or whatever it was,
It was a lot of money.
it would be quite a bit of money now.
Sure.
The fantastic, beautiful altar to St. Joseph. And it is also online. It's the Shrine of St. Joseph in St. Louis.
Well, Dr. Mary Ann and Dr. Larry, through your presentation tonight, I never knew that I didn't know anything about St. Joseph. And so you guys fixed that. It was a wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
There's so much more that we could have said, but that's it.
I'm going to add one more little thing to close, unless somebody else wants to speak. About 30 years ago, when I was in Florida, I was connected to some Sisters of St. Joseph who made it clear to me that that St. Joseph was a very special person, and they often talked about the staff that flowered, and they were very proud of that, true or not true. But they told me that on St. Joseph's feast day every year, if you say 3 prayers to St. Joseph, that he honors them. You name 3 people that you want to offer prayers for, and he will honor these prayer requests. I have done it every St. Joseph's Day for 30 years. Now, it's not that these requests get answered right away. My 52-year-old daughter's getting married this year, but it takes time. It takes time, but I did find it and believed it. My heart believed that this is a real thing. And so I've honored St. Joseph with these requests every year. Anybody else have that one, or am I the only one with that interesting little aside? Okay, no one else that I've ever known other than the Sisters of St. Joseph. Kathleen, yes?
Well, this is a cute little thing about, you mentioned him as a realtor, right? And
Patron
of course,
saint.
they say that if you have to purchase a home, or you're going to be selling your home really, to take a statue of St. Joseph and bury it. And of course, there's a cute little story where this woman followed it, she did it and whatnot. And the dog had dug it up and brought it over by his doghouse. And sure enough, somebody came to the house and asked if she could purchase the doghouse. So it can be I'm a firm believer in all of this. So
I have done it twice and it has worked.
yeah, everybody tells me that.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody will tell you it's a myth too, but they do it anyway, right?
Well, doesn't make any difference.
If you're trying to
Work to
honor
work.
St. Joseph. Yeah, I understand. Anybody else?
Thank you both for a lovely evening.
We did have a closing prayer. I can share the screen one more time.
And we'll mute you so that we'd like you to pray along with us, even though the sound doesn't work very well when everyone's speaking at once. So, Larry, you going to mute everyone?
Well, you can mute yourselves.
Or we can mute ourselves. Okay.
Mute yourselves. The act of consecration to St. Joseph, or we thought would be a nice way to end our session.
Yeah.
Dear- We can just, we could say it together or whatever. Oh, dearest St. Joseph, I consecrate myself to your honor and give myself to you, that you may always be my father, my protector, and my guide in the way of salvation. Obtain for me a greater purity of heart and fervent love of the interior life. After your example, may I do all my actions for the greater glory of God, in union with the divine heart of Jesus and the Immaculate Heart of Mary. O blessed Saint Joseph, pray for me
For me.
that I may share in the peace
and
joy
joy.
of your holy death. Amen.
God bless you all. Thank you for being here. We'll see you next year.
Thank you.
Thanks for all for being here.
Thank you.
All is well. As we say, see you in church.
Be in church, right?